Getting into Warhammer 40k can be incredibly overwhelming. The sheer number of models, rabbit holes of lore, and the level of work it takes to get an army on the tabletop can be a lot, to say the least. But luckily, once you get the ball rolling, it's not nearly as big of a beast as it seems to be. I'm going to tell you about my journey into 40k, the reservations I had, show off some of my earliest painted models compared to where I'm at now, and talk about how being part of this community has just generally been a great experience. For you new folks, or for y'all still on the fence, this one's for you. Roll the intro. For starters, it helps to know the lore of the universe. Warhammer's been around for a good 30-something years, so there's plenty of points to push off of. The rule of cool is king in 40k, so pick a faction you think seems the coolest, and go where the winds take you. I started with reading all about the Emperor of Mankind, arguably one of the most important and pivotal figures in the entire setting. Being as how the entire human faction of the Imperium of Man revolves around the Emperor, I thought it was kind of important for me to know why they're such big fans of the guy. But not everyone thinks the Imperium is that cool or all that interesting. You can look at the fall of the Eldar, the apocalyptic war in heaven, waged millions of years ago by the robotic Necrons, or what the mysterious dimension of the warp is and what resides there. The galaxy of Warhammer 40k is constantly at war, so there's never a dull moment. Once I figured out what seemed coolest to me, I started browsing models. Space Marine models are pretty sick, but I still hadn't the slightest idea of what I was looking for, what I was looking at, or how to even use them to play anything. I went down to my local Warhammer shop, hung out for a while, and eventually came to understand what all I was looking at and where to go from there. But I was still hesitant. 40k is a huge scale of gaming, and I wasn't about to drop a few $100 on some stuff I might end up hating in the long run. To that end, I was shown Kill Team. It's a much smaller, squad-based game that plays a little differently than regular 40k, but shares a lot of the same models and basic mechanics. At that time, the Into the Dark At that time, the Into the Dark box set was the most recent Kill Team set I could get my hands on, and it had all the books, terrain, and models I needed to get started. This is where the reservations really kicked in. While I was down for poring over the lore, cracking this box, and seeing all the sprues stressed me out. I'd never done anything like this before. I wasn't very artsy, still not very artsy, and I've never messed with modeling because I always told myself I didn't have the time to sit down and dedicate hours to it. Of course, I was full of crap. I just wanted to dedicate hours to something like playing Stellaris or some other weaponized autism game backlogged into my Steam library. But I stuck it out. I found that building the models, even the ones with the tiny baby hands like the Imperial Breachers, to be pretty therapeutic. The idea of painting the little fuckers also stressed me out, but I stuck that out too. After a few games of Kill Team, I was itching for something bigger, so I took the leap, bought this Black Templars box that came with the codex, these cool models, and a bunch of other stuff. But being bad at painting does absolutely fuck all for your confidence as a hobbyist. I've never been the artsy type, but my wife does it for a living, so she was able to pass on some of her wisdom to me. So this right here is one of the first models I ever did. It is a Black Templars Marshal. And in hindsight, this really isn't all that bad for a first-time model maker and painter. But at the time, that absolutely destroyed me with how bad it was. It really got me down in the dumps. Painting is by far probably the hardest part of 40k, aside from playing the game itself. And if you're not artsy, painting can be a massive obstacle to sticking with things. You see everyone else's models and you're like, man, why can't mine turn out like that? And on the surface, it's really, really silly to be that way because you're new to it and you know that. But at the same time, it can be really discouraging. But it can also be really inspiring. I know I never really had the desire to do crazy effects or anything like that. I just wanted it to be crisp, clean, and like have a more realistic look to it. Yeah, this right here is a Blade Guard vet that I'd done recently, and you know what? What a world of difference 3 years time makes. Painting is really stressful, but I promise you it gets easier and a lot more fun once you get the hang of it. You don't need to have an art degree or even be remotely talented to make a solid looking model. Now, I started at the end of 9th edition and it was a little more complex than 10th is. This game is generally just too convoluted to just dive into. You gotta either do your homework beforehand or know someone that can show you the ropes. After I harassed some friends into getting armies, we all had one big game, about 500 points each, slowly built up from there. Fast forward a bit, I'm playing every week. I've got 4 armies now, and I'm here talking to all of you. If it wasn't for how welcoming and wholesome the Warhammer community has been, both online and at my local game shops, I'm not sure I'd be doing this. This community is unlike any other I've been a part of. We're all in it for the love of the game and the setting. Some of us partake in all aspects of the hobby, and some just paint, some just read the books, but all of us are in the same boat. This has become my autism obsession right up there with Star Wars, and I wouldn't have it any other way. If you just go to your local game shop when some dudes are playing 40k and ask to watch or learn or both, 99% of the time they're going to say welcome aboard and help you out however you need. I know nerds aren't the most socially competent, but really it's worth breaking out of your shell for this. But I wasn't kidding when I said the amount of work it takes to get models on the tabletop is staggering. You got to learn all the main rules, your army rules, your faction rules, what synergizes well with what, and to get them painted. It's natural to have reservations about all that, especially considering the cost of entry. Literally, this shit ain't cheap. But I'm a firm believer that everyone who wants to play should play, regardless of the background or disposable income. Maybe you got a 3D printer and you can go crazy with that. Some people even use paper cutout models. Whether it's Warhammer or Warhammer, you're gonna have a blast either way. But I wanna loop back to painting for a second. Painting can be kind of a pain in the ass, especially when you're new. How can you make your life easier? Contrast paints. Contrast paints are a lifesaver. They're thin paints that provide coverage and shading all in one package. Some do this a little better than others, but for the most part, I haven't had too many bad experiences with them. Don't really work well on vehicles though, just a heads up. Such a large surface area and thin paints mean you're gonna have to use a lot of it. Now, I did do this Mauler Fiend, and one second here. My Fulgrim, mostly in contrast paints just to see if I could. And for the most part, I'm pretty pleased with how they turned out. On regular infantry models and the like, these things are a lifesaver. You can hopefully see on this Custodian here how the gold paint has seeped into the spots between the armor and gives it that sort of shadow look to it. If I had a real camera, you might be able to see more of that, but I think you get the idea. It brings out a lot of depth. On Space Marines, these work great as well. This is a Blade Guard Ancient that I did entirely in contrast. Finally, contrast works super duper well on Chaos models like Rubric Marines. A little dab of it, put it on the armor plate, and push it around so you can add coverage, depth, and not have to worry about it spilling over onto the trim because you're using the edge of that trim as like a stopgap from spillage. Even though this stuff does some of the heavy shading for you, I like to hit every finished model with a light coat of Nuln Oil to finish it off and give it that final bit of depth and realism that it needs to really pop. For contrast paints, I think GW Citadel has the best in terms of quality. I use them on my Black Templars, and as you saw, they look pretty good. That said, I don't only use GW paints. Army Painter is another great brand that really stepped up their quality in recent years. Army Painter also mixes really well thanks to these little mixer balls in the bottles. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's these little metal balls in here that make mixing up your paint a whole lot easier, and it just helps it flow out a little better. There are also these like really weird like little bottle types. They're like little drip bottles. So they're a lot harder to actually make a mess with compared to like a GW contrast pot. I pretty much only use contrast paints at this point. They've sped up the process and have allowed me to play some serious catch up on my backlog. For all you new painters out there, these sort of paints are going to help you out a lot while you get the basics down. Make sure to prime the model in a light undercoat. White or light gray tends to do best, and you'll be just fine. Paint and trim on Chaos models like Rubrics can be a massive headache. With paint markers, however, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. I did all my recent Rubric trim with paint markers, and it has sped up the process tremendously. I personally use the AK and the Play Markers brand, but I'm moving to Gundam markers soon because they're much more finely tipped. As you see in the pictures, the ones I have are getting the job done just fine. And that's where I'm at. Warhammer is certainly a time sink, but it's one that's well worth it. It's helped me out both in making a ton of new friends, bringing out my inner creativity, and being generally a therapeutic experience all around. I can't say that every part of Warhammer is for everyone, but I do believe there's something here for everyone. Once I got over those reservations that I mentioned and kind of took that leap, I never looked back. If you're on the fence or you're new to this, I want to say welcome. We're very glad to have you. Warhammer is for everyone, and I'm so glad you decided to give it a try, give me a try, and give the wider community a try, and I hope you stick around. If you want to learn more about how to actually play Warhammer 40k or how to build army lists, you can check out these videos of mine as well to help you get started. I also want to shout out a couple of other Warhammer creators. Scholar's Lore is a great dude and knows his lore inside and out. He's helped me get started on this platform and his stuff is really well written. If you're a lore buff or you want to know about some deep lore, he's your guy. Arbiter Ian is a favorite of mine. I've been watching this guy for a while and he's one of the first Warhammer creators I ever watched. He covers lore and gameplay stuff for 40k and 30k, so you should check him out too. Finally, Archivist Lore is another great lore channel and a fellow Scholar's Lore fan. Puts a lot of effort in production into his writing, and he's also a really great guy, so go give him some love. That's all for this one, y'all. I've never done this style of video before, but I really enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you did too. If you're new around these parts, whether it's to the channel or to the hobby, again, welcome. Thanks for hanging out with me today. As always, drop a like if you like it, subscribe if you really liked it, as well as hitting that notification bell. Check out the community tab for shitposter shenanigans. I'll see y'all in the next one.